San Francisco Police Chief Bill Scott says real-time technology of surveillance cameras could go a long way toward reducing crime in the city.
But San Francisco's public defender, Mano Raju, feels differently, much differently. He calls the proposal regressive and harmful to those who are already underserved and over-policed. And he is joining us live now to talk more about the proposal and his concerns. Thank you for your time tonight. We appreciate it. Of course, the mayor's proposal initiative, there are many layers to it. It's a broad initiative, but let's start with the one dealing with the tenderloin and the public drug use. A number of immigrant and poor families went to the mayor's office to express their concerns that their children are experiencing difficulty just stepping outside their homes because of the public drug use. The mayor wants to increase arrests and or treatment in cases like that. Why would you be against that?
Well, there's, it's completely understandable that people have concerns about things happening on the street. This, I have a family in San Francisco raising a child here, and it's understandable that people have concerns, but we've seen time and time again that the focus on incarceration just simply and punishment simply doesn't work. And I know the mayor's also committed to treatment, and we've seen that in parts of her proposal, but oftentimes when the press tends to amplify situations on the street, there's almost a reaction to what some people feel is almost like a safety blanket. Okay, more cops, more arrests, more punishment. And it's almost a reflexive move. But the reality is we've seen time and time again that that does not work. The individuals that we represent have serious economic needs, mental illness, there's addiction, disease, trauma that our clients have been dealing with. And on the front end, I think there needs to be much more focus on housing, supportive housing, treatment, job training, employment, educational opportunities. And we've seen, it's a long game, but when we start investing in those areas, that's going to be the kind of solutions that lead to long-term benefit for individuals on the street and communities.
I don't think you're going to find a lot of pushback on those ideas to try to take care of people who need help, whether it's mental illness, drug addiction, homelessness, getting jobs. We all agree people should have those opportunities. What about those are long-term problems that need a long time to fix, a long plan and a commitment. What about the short-term problems of smash and grab robberies in Union Square, at shopping malls across the Bay Area, of people who are arrested for stealing goods and released almost immediately after they're brought to the jail because of COVID restrictions, that they can't stay in the jail. They're not life-threatening crimes, they're property crimes, and they're treated as small issues. But at the same time, business owners, they're losing their business. They're having their windows smashed out. They're losing thousands of dollars of goods. So what are the short-term solutions, which might include having police being able to access surveillance cameras in real time, like other cities outside of San Francisco do with great effect?
Well, again, we've seen this focus on arrest, and obviously our job is to zealously defend whoever we represent, to make sure that people aren't convicted of crimes that they're not guilty of. But more importantly, there's a real opportunity when someone is arrested if we invest in the right places. For example, we have a pretrial release unit in our office, and we are immediately establishing that trust with individuals. We've recently gotten some funding for a couple positions where we can immediately start assessing people's needs. What does this individual need? Is it a class at City College? Is it a substance abuse treatment? Is it job training? Is it a place where they're going to sleep tomorrow night? Is it substance abuse? Establishing that relationship with individuals, and that from a position of trust, because they know we're also fighting for their best legal outcome, is the person that, if someone's on the outside, is going to turn to. If someone's struggling, they're not going to be calling the police, probation, parole, a probation officer, but they may call someone that they have that trusting relationship with, they're slipping, so that these events don't happen. And then we do not want to see these types of incidents happening on the street, because it is a danger to public safety. But ultimately, if we're interested in community health, it's these type of investments in the short term, if we put extra investments in there, that can turn some of these things around that we're seeing.
Certainly.
But again, we have to look at the statistics, and sometimes the press will elevate something. We have to actually look and see, is there more of this particular incident happening, or is it something that's just been elevated at a particular time.
I think you seem to be amplifying that the press is making these things larger than they are, but I still don't get a sense of you speaking to the very real concerns about the victims of these crimes, the families who live in these neighborhoods who are terrified to have their children walk outside and go to a park. I don't hear you addressing those concerns. Certainly, I think as Ken mentioned, most of us do feel that there does need to be more on the side of prevention and help and rehabilitation. Those kinds of things are crucial. San Francisco has spent millions of dollars trying to address a lot of that, particularly homelessness. But what about the short-term solutions? I'm not hearing you address those who are the victims of these incidents.
Well, I think that anyone who is a victim of any incident, it needs to be obviously, they need to be attended to, and they need to be
In what
supported.
way? Attended to how? How should their concerns be addressed?
Well, their concerns need to be addressed. Anytime there's any sort of harm, I think that needs to be addressed in terms of what is going to make that person whole. But what I'm saying is just merely arresting people and incarcerating for some period of time is not addressing that person's needs.
So what does address it? In your view, as a professional in San Francisco and a leader, what is your view that will address it for the people who are, again, afraid to send their children outside?
I think what we need to do is to start making conditions as safe as possible for people. But the way to get at those solutions is not, to your point. I think we've been investing in this law enforcement and policing for a long time. The police budget is quite big in San Francisco. This type of investment has happened, and if people aren't feeling safe, to me, that's evidence that the way we've traditionally been addressing these issues is not working. So what I'm proposing is, rather than doing the way we've always been doing, let's invest in other solutions that can have that long-term impact, that can keep people safe. And I think when you really see someone, you have those wraparound services, invest more there, then we will see, if to the extent there are public safety concerns, less of that happening, because we have those wraparound services for individuals that may be at risk of committing such an act, because we've actually fully invested in that area. And when we find those true investments and the culturally competent providers, I think you're going to see less of the incidents that are concerning people. Most people, if they have that job, they're not going to be on the street trying to, if the uncle is able to get their record expunged so that they can get a job, they can buy that iPhone for someone, so there won't be that type of theft from someone.
Mano Raju, I'm sorry, we're out of time. We've actually gone way beyond our time trying to get to some solutions on this. And this is a discussion and a debate that will continue, obviously, for a long time in San Francisco, because those of us who've lived here and worked here for decades have seen things get much worse over the past few years. Thank you for your time. We appreciate it.
Thank you so much.